There is a part of your mind that has never been anxious. It has been there this whole time, beneath the thinking, beneath the planning, beneath the replaying of conversations that didn't need to be replayed. Tonight, we are going to find it together. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Wherever you are right now, let your body settle into the surface beneath you. Feel the weight of your own stillness. Tonight we are going to trace the corridors of 100 psychology facts about inner peace and the subconscious mind. From the neural roots of calm, to the quiet intelligence running beneath your thoughts, to the truth your body already knows. This kind of content, patient, slow, built for tired minds, takes time to find the people who need it most. A gentle like or subscribe carries this space forward, helping one more sleepy soul searching for quiet find their way here, one calm night at a time. You don't need to hold on to any of what follows. Let the facts arrive and pass like warm light moving slowly across a wall. Feel your chest soften. Feel the small muscles around your eyes release. You are not here to learn. You are here to rest. Everything else can wait. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You are floating where the mind's quietest signals move like light through still water. Let your mind soften with the stillness beneath thought. And now we begin. Your brain never fully stops. Even in deep sleep, even in moments of complete stillness, your nervous system continues processing, regulating, and quietly organizing your inner world. What we experience as inner peace is not the brain going silent. It is the brain finding a particular kind of coherence, a state where its many regions are no longer competing, but moving together, like instruments finally playing in the same key. Neuroscientists have described this as a shift from fragmented neural firing to synchronized low-frequency oscillation. It is less like turning off a machine, and more like a river finding its smoothest current. Peace has a signature the brain recognizes, and has been learning since before you were born. The part of the brain responsible for deliberate, conscious thought represents only a fraction of the total processing occurring at any given moment. Neuroscience has long understood that the overwhelming majority of neural computation, the regulation, the monitoring, the emotional calibration, happens beneath the threshold of awareness. What we call thinking is, in a sense, the very last thing the brain does. The subconscious is not mysterious. It is simply efficient in ways consciousness cannot match. And tonight, that efficiency is working quietly on your behalf. The term subconscious, as used in modern neuroscience, refers broadly to brain processes that operate outside focal awareness. This includes the regulation of your heartbeat, the calibration of your immune response, the management of emotional memory, and the continuous background monitoring of your environment for threat or safety. Research has continued to refine our understanding of how these processes interact with felt experience. What emerges, gently, is the sense that body and mind have always been having the same quiet conversation, and that the nervous system was never as divided against itself as it sometimes seemed. Inner peace has a measurable biological state. When the nervous system shifts from sympathetic activation, the stress response, toward parasympathetic dominance, researchers can observe specific physiological changes. Heart rate variability increases, cortisol levels decline. The amygdala, which processes threat and fear, shows decreased metabolic activity. The prefrontal cortex, linked to perspective and reasoning, becomes more active. These are not poetic metaphors for calm. They are measurements. And what they tell us is that peace is not the absence of biology. It is a particular arrangement of biology, one the body moves toward. Naturally, when conditions allow, the default mode network is a set of brain regions that becomes most active when you are not focused on an external task. It includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and parts of the temporal lobe. For many years, neuroscientists assumed this network was simply idling, a kind of neural background noise. More recent research has overturned that idea. The default mode network is now understood to be doing some of the brain's most integrative work, consolidating memory, processing social and emotional information, constructing a sense of self, and weaving experience into meaning. Stillness is not wasted time. It is when the mind turns inward to tend what waking attention overlooks. The brain begins responding to information before conscious awareness catches up. Studies using electroencephalography have shown that neural processing of a stimulus begins within milliseconds of its occurrence, well before the person reports noticing it. What this suggests is not that consciousness is an illusion, but that the subconscious is always a few steps ahead, already orienting, already assessing, already deciding what deserves to be brought into the light of attention. When you feel uneasy for no apparent reason, your subconscious may have already processed something your conscious mind has not yet reached. Emotional regulation, the ability to manage the intensity and duration of emotional states, is largely a subconscious process. Research in affective neuroscience shows that many regulatory processes occur automatically through structures deep in the brain, including the hypothalamus, the insula, and the anterior cingulate cortex. These structures communicate constantly with the body, adjusting arousal levels, modulating pain sensitivity, and quietly influencing mood, all without deliberate effort. This is why certain environments, sounds, or even temperatures can shift your emotional state before you have consciously registered why. Your nervous system is always reading the room, and it is doing so far faster than thought. The vagus nerve is one of the longest nerves in the human body. It runs from the brainstem through the neck, into the chest, and down into the abdomen, connecting the brain to the heart, the lungs, and the digestive system. It is a primary carrier of parasympathetic signals, the neural messages that slow the heart, ease the breath, and promote a state of rest and recovery. Recent research has expanded our understanding of vagal tone, the degree to which the vagus nerve is functioning robustly. Higher vagal tone is associated with greater emotional resilience, faster recovery from stress, and a stronger capacity for inner calm. You can support vagal tone simply by breathing slowly and deeply, which is, not coincidentally, exactly what you are doing right now. The body keeps a continuous internal record of its own state. This process, called interoception, involves the brain monitoring signals from organs, muscles, and tissues to create what researchers describe as a felt sense of the body's condition. The insula, a region folded deep within the cerebral cortex, plays a central role in interoceptive awareness. When interoception is well calibrated, people tend to have a more accurate sense of their emotional state, better stress recovery, and a greater baseline sense of well-being. When it is disrupted, as it often is in chronic stress, the body's signals become harder to read, and the background sense of unease becomes harder to locate or resolve. Inner peace, in this framework, begins with learning to hear what the body is already saying. So from the very first moments of our journey, something is already becoming clear. Inner peace is not a state you have to construct from outside yourself. The architecture for it exists in your nervous system, your subconscious processing, your vagal tone, and your interoceptive awareness. It is less a destination you arrive at through effort, and more a condition your biology is always quietly orienting toward, given the right circumstances. Everything we explore tonight is, in one way or another, a description of what those circumstances are, and you are already creating some of them, simply by lying still and breathing. The amygdala is often described as the brain's alarm system. It is a small, almond-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe, and it is exquisitely sensitive to threat, responding to facial expressions, sounds, smells, and memories associated with danger. But the amygdala does more than sound alarms. It also helps encode positive emotional memories, and it plays a role in attaching emotional significance to experience. Research has shown that the amygdala responds not only to external threat, but to internal states, including loneliness, uncertainty, and the absence of perceived control. Understanding your amygdala is not about suppressing it. It is about learning to reassure it, and reassurance, for the amygdala, comes primarily from one source: safety signals from the body and the environment. The prefrontal cortex sits at the front of the brain, just behind the forehead. It is sometimes called the seat of executive function, responsible for planning, decision-making, and the regulation of social behavior. But one of its most valuable roles, from the perspective of inner peace, is its ability to modulate the amygdala. When the prefrontal cortex is active and well connected to deeper limbic structures, it can send calming signals downward, reducing the intensity of threat responses before they reach full activation. This connection is strengthened by sleep, by mindfulness practice, by safe and trusting social relationships, and by consistent periods of rest. The brain gets better at being calm the more opportunities it has to practice. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, does not stop after childhood. Research has consistently demonstrated that the adult brain retains a remarkable ability to change its structure and function in response to experience. This applies directly to emotional regulation and inner peace. Some neuroimaging studies have found that structural and functional changes following consistent mindfulness practice over weeks or months can be meaningful and measurable, with effects on amygdala reactivity and prefrontal connectivity that parallel, in some respects, outcomes seen in other therapeutic approaches. Research is ongoing, and individual results vary, but the evidence is sufficient to take seriously. The capacity for calm is not fixed. It responds to practice. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but this framing misrepresents its role. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid, a steroid hormone produced by the adrenal glands, and it serves essential functions throughout the body. It regulates metabolism, modulates immune response, and helps the body manage energy demands. cortisol levels naturally follow a circadian rhythm, highest in the first hour after waking, gradually declining through the day, and lowest in the hours before sleep. Problems arise not from cortisol itself, but from its chronic elevation, which occurs when the nervous system remains in a state of ongoing activation. When cortisol stays high for extended periods, it suppresses immune function, disrupts memory consolidation, and gradually degrades the neural circuits responsible for calm. Rest is not an indulgence. For the cortisol system, it is maintenance. The concept of psychological safety, feeling secure enough to be oneself without fear of judgment or harm, has roots in developmental psychology but has been increasingly studied in neuroscience. Research shows that when people feel psychologically safe, the brain's threat detection systems become quieter. Resources that would otherwise be allocated to careful watching become available for learning, creativity, and repair. The feeling of safety is not simply an emotion. It is a neurobiological state, one in which the nervous system has determined, through continuous subconscious assessment, that the current environment does not require defensive activation, creating conditions of safety in your relationships, your environment, and your internal self-talk is among the most direct pathways to a calmer mind. Your heart communicates with your brain more than your brain communicates with your heart. The vagus nerve carries information in both directions, but research in vagal anatomy suggests that a significant majority of its fibers carry signals upward, from the body to the brain, rather than downward. This means your heart is continuously sending information to your nervous system about its own state, long before conscious awareness receives it. When heart rate variability is high, indicating a healthy, flexible rhythm, the brain receives signals associated with safety and ease. When it is low, the brain receives signals that something may be wrong. You feel this not as data, but as mood, a vague sense of well-being or its absence. Caring for your heart, in this sense, is caring for your inner peace. Slow breathing, at a rate of roughly 5 to 6 breaths per minute, has been studied extensively as a direct pathway to the autonomic nervous system. This pace, which is slower than the typical adult resting rate of 12 to 18 breaths per minute, creates a phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, a natural fluctuation in heart rate that becomes most pronounced at this rhythm. Research has shown that this pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, increases heart rate variability, and produces subjective feelings of calm. You do not need to monitor your breathing for this to happen. Simply allowing your breath to deepen and slow, as it naturally does when the body feels safe, is enough. The subconscious mind is deeply sensitive to pattern and repetition. This is why habits form, why familiar environments feel calming, and why certain sounds or scents can return you to emotional states you haven't inhabited in years. Psychologists describe this as associative conditioning, the linking of neural responses to contextual cues through repeated experience. The relevance for inner peace is direct. Calm states can be cultivated as associations. Regular practices of stillness, consistent sensory environments for relaxation, and repeated experiences of safety all deepen the subconscious pathways that lead toward rest. Over time, the conditions of calm become triggers for calm. The practice becomes the place. Sleep itself is one of the most powerful regulators of emotional balance the brain possesses. During slow-wave sleep, the deepest stages of non-REM sleep, the brain undergoes a process of synaptic downscaling, reducing the overall strength of synaptic connections built up during waking hours. This is sometimes described as the brain resetting its emotional sensitivity. Memories and emotions that felt overwhelming during the day are processed during sleep and return to awareness with reduced intensity. Research has consistently shown that sleep deprivation dramatically increases the reactivity of the brain's threat detection systems. Prioritizing sleep is not a passive act. It is one of the most active investments you can make in your capacity for inner peace. The insula is a region of the cortex tucked inside a fold in the brain's outer surface. It integrates signals from the body with signals from the environment and from other brain regions, producing what researchers describe as a unified felt sense of one's condition. The insula is active during both physical and emotional pain, but also during empathy, during aesthetic pleasure, and during moments of felt calm. Neuroimaging studies have found that experienced meditators show structural differences in the insula compared to non-meditators. Increased thickness, increased connectivity. What this suggests is that the capacity to feel one's own inner state clearly, not to suppress or override it, but simply to perceive it, is itself a trainable skill, and one that consistently tends to correlate with well-being. The body's inflammatory response and its emotional state are more closely linked than was understood for most of modern medicine. Cytokines, signaling proteins released during immune activation, can cross the blood-brain barrier and directly influence neurotransmitter function, altering mood, motivation, and the felt sense of ease or discomfort. This is why illness so often brings low mood alongside physical symptoms. But the relationship runs in both directions. Chronic psychological stress elevates inflammatory markers in the blood, gradually increasing the body's vulnerability to conditions that thrive in environments of sustained tension. This does not mean that inner peace is a cure for illness, but it does mean that peace and physical health are not separate concerns. They are deeply, biologically intertwined. Social connection is one of the most consistent predictors of well-being, identified in psychological and neuroscientific research. The presence of trusted others, even imagined, even recalled, activates what researchers call the social safety system, a network of brain regions that shifts the nervous system toward openness, ease, and reduced threat monitoring. Loneliness, conversely, activates the same neural threat detection circuits as physical pain. Research by social neuroscientist John Cacioppo demonstrated that chronic loneliness increases cortisol, disrupts sleep architecture, and is associated with accelerated neural aging. Inner peace, in this light, is not a solitary achievement. It is partly woven from the quality of connection we carry, even in memory, even in absence. The concept of allostatic load refers to the cumulative biological cost of prolonged stress, the wear and tear accumulated on the body and brain when regulatory systems are chronically activated. Research pioneered by neuroscientist Bruce McEwen showed that allostatic load increases with age, with social adversity, and with insufficient recovery time. High allostatic load is associated with poorer memory, reduced immune function, and a diminished baseline sense of well-being. What this means, in practical terms, is that rest is not a pause between periods of productivity. It is the process by which the biological cost of living is repaid. Every genuine moment of ease, including this one, is, in the language of the body, a form of restoration. Theta brainwaves, oscillating at frequencies between 4 and 8 cycles per second, are associated with a state between waking and sleep, sometimes called the hypnagogic threshold. This is the boundary you cross in the minutes before sleep arrives. When the mind becomes softer, images may appear unbidden, and the ordinary logic of waking thought begins to loosen. Research has found that theta states are also present during deep meditation and during certain forms of creative insight. They are associated with increased access to subconscious material, memories, associations, and emotional knowledge that the alert mind tends to filter out. The approach to sleep is not simply a transition into unconsciousness. It is a doorway into a different kind of intelligence. And here, at the first resting point in our journey, a pattern is already taking shape. Inner peace is not a mental achievement. It is a biological homecoming, a return to a state the nervous system has been oriented toward since before memory began. The subconscious is not an obstacle to this return. It is the path. Everything we have touched in these first 25 facts points toward the same quiet truth. Your mind already knows the way to stillness. It simply needs the conditions to move there. And tonight, you are creating those conditions. Pause here and let yourself notice your own body. Right now, as you breathe out slowly, your brain is doing something remarkable. It is sorting through today, quietly, without asking your permission, deciding what matters, softening what hurt, filing what can wait. You don't need to help it. It has been doing this work since before you knew it had a name. Every cell in this body knows how to rest. Every part of your nervous system is trained for this moment. You are not trying to sleep. You are simply allowing what has always been possible. Now we continue. The autonomic nervous system has two primary modes, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. But research in the past decade has added meaningful nuance to this picture. Polyvagal theory, developed by neuroscientist Stephen Porges, proposes that the parasympathetic system itself has two branches. An older, more primitive branch associated with shutdown and freezing, and a newer, evolutionarily recent branch, the ventral vagal circuit, associated with social engagement, curiosity, and the kind of warm, connected calm that characterizes genuine inner peace. This distinction matters because it suggests that calm is not simply the absence of stress. It is its own positive state, one characterized by openness, presence, and felt safety. And it has its own dedicated neural hardware. Mindfulness, broadly defined as non-judgmental, present moment awareness, has become one of the most rigorously studied psychological interventions of the past several decades. Meta-analyses covering hundreds of randomized controlled trials have consistently found that mindfulness-based programs reduce symptoms of anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. More recent research has begun to identify the neural mechanisms involved. Regular mindfulness practice is associated with reduced ruminative activity in the default mode network, decreased reactivity in threat processing regions, and increased connectivity between areas linked to perspective and emotion regulation. These are not small effects, and the benefits tend to persist after the practice ends. Rumination, The tendency to repeatedly focus attention on distressing thoughts or feelings is one of the most consistent predictors of anxiety and depression identified in clinical psychology. Neuroimaging studies show that rumination involves sustained activation of the default mode network combined with reduced activity in lateral prefrontal regions, creating a loop of self-referential thinking without the moderating influence of perspective or context. What disrupts rumination is not suppression. Research consistently shows that trying not to think about something intensifies its activation. What disrupts it is redirection, engaging the senses, slowing the breath, shifting attention to the body. This is, in part, why slow, sensory-rich experiences like this one interrupt the cycle. The subconscious already knows how to quiet the loop. It simply needs a different signal to follow. The body's stress response was designed for short-term, acute threats. When a lion appeared on the ancient savanna, cortisol and adrenaline flooded the system. Energy was redirected from digestion and immune function to muscles and sensory processing, and the body was prepared for action. The threat resolved, and the system recovered. The problem modern nervous systems face is that cognitive threat, worry, anticipation, social evaluation, financial concern, activates the same biological machinery, but without resolution. The body cannot distinguish between a physical predator and a difficult email. What this means is that inner peace, in the modern context, often requires something the ancient body never needed: a deliberate practice of telling the nervous system that the current moment is safe, even when the mind is still rehearsing what might go wrong. Gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the mammalian nervous system. It works by reducing neural excitability, quieting the firing of neurons, and producing a calming effect on brain activity. Approximately 1/3 of all neurons in the brain use GABA as their primary signaling molecule. GABA activity is associated with reduced anxiety, slower thought, decreased muscle tension, and the physiological state of ease. Several sleep medications work by enhancing GABA signaling, but so do several natural processes, including slow breathing, gentle physical movement, and progressive muscle relaxation. The body has a built-in quieting system. What it needs is the signal that it is safe to use it. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter often associated with mood, but its role is considerably broader. Approximately 90% of the body's serotonin is produced not in the brain, but in the gastrointestinal tract, where it regulates intestinal movement, modulates immune signaling, and contributes to the ongoing conversation between the gut and the brain. The gut and the brain are in continuous dialogue through the vagus nerve, and the emotional tone of that conversation is influenced significantly by the health and balance of the gut microbiome. Research has found that the composition of gut bacteria influences anxiety levels, stress reactivity, and even sleep quality, the terrain of inner peace. It appears includes the digestive system. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, is produced in the hypothalamus and released in response to social touch, eye contact, and positive social interaction. It reduces reactivity in threat processing regions, promotes trust, and has been shown to lower stress hormone levels and blood pressure. Research continues to map oxytocin's reach in the brain, with receptor activity identified in regions associated with memory and stress regulation. What is consistent across studies is the direction of effect. Felt connection, whether through presence, memory, or imagination, produces measurable shifts in the nervous system toward openness and ease. Warmth is not metaphor, it is chemistry. And chemistry, for the sleeping mind, is permission. The hippocampus is central to memory formation and contextual learning, but it also plays an important role in stress regulation. When the hippocampus is healthy and well-functioning, it provides the brain with the context it needs to determine that a past threat is no longer present, effectively signaling that it is safe to stand down. When the hippocampus is compromised by chronic stress, by sleep deprivation, or by elevated cortisol, this contextual braking fails, and the brain continues to respond to old threats as though they were new. Research has shown that the hippocampus is one of the few brain regions where new neurons continue to form in adulthood, a process called adult neurogenesis, supported by aerobic exercise, sleep, and reduced chronic stress. Peace is not only a felt state, it is also a cellular one. The concept of psychological flexibility, the ability to contact the present moment fully, without unnecessary defense, and to act in ways that serve one's values, has become central to modern clinical psychology. Research in acceptance and commitment therapy has shown that psychological flexibility is one of the strongest predictors of well-being and resilience across clinical and non-clinical populations. Importantly, flexibility is not the same as positivity. It does not require feeling good. It requires the capacity to hold difficult experiences with enough openness that they do not dictate behavior. This distinction between what is felt and what is clung to is one the subconscious understands intuitively. The mind, allowed to move, moves toward equilibrium. It is resistance that holds the distress in place. The relationship between body position and emotional state is bidirectional, supported by a broad body of evidence in embodied cognition research. Body position influences hormonal state and nervous system assessment. When the jaw unclenches, when the shoulders drop, when the breath deepens, the brainstem receives signals that have been associated through decades of lived experience with safety. The body has learned to read its own language. And when it hears the physical vocabulary of peace, soft muscles, slow breath, still limbs, it adjusts its assessment of the moment accordingly. You are not just resting, you are giving your nervous system evidence. Self-compassion, the tendency to respond to one's own suffering and inadequacy with kindness, rather than judgment, has been extensively studied in psychological research. Findings consistently show that self-compassion is more strongly associated with emotional stability and well-being than self-esteem, and that it correlates significantly with reduced anxiety, depression, and rumination. Neurologically, self-compassion activates caregiving neural circuits, reducing the activation of self-threat responses and promoting the kind of calm reassurance that the nervous system responds to as a safety signal. The subconscious does not distinguish between the kindness you offer a friend and the kindness you offer yourself. In both cases, the body hears, "You are safe here." The anterior cingulate cortex, a region sitting at the intersection of cognition and emotion, plays a central role in error detection, conflict monitoring, and the regulation of emotional responses to uncertainty. When this region is overactive, in the absence of adequate modulation, it contributes to the experience of excessive self-monitoring, the kind of internal watching that makes genuine rest feel unreachable. Research has shown that practices that quiet the inner critic, including compassion-based meditation and certain forms of cognitive behavioral therapy, reduce this reactivity and the associated sense of being observed from within. Peace, in this sense, is partly the experience of being watched over, rather than watched. Nature exposure has measurable effects on the nervous system. Studies conducted across multiple countries have found that time spent in natural environments reduces cortisol levels, lowers blood pressure, decreases threat-related brain activation, and improves scores on measures of mood and emotional regulation. In Japan, a practice called Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, has been formally incorporated into preventive medicine. The biological mechanisms involved include exposure to phytoncides, organic compounds released by trees, which have been shown to reduce stress hormones. Attention restoration theory suggests that natural environments require less directed attention than urban ones, allowing the voluntary attention system to rest and recover. The body knows what it needs. Sometimes it just needs trees. Music affects the nervous system directly and measurably. Slow tempo music, particularly below 60 beats per minute, near the resting heart rate, tends to slow both breathing and heart rate, and shift brainwave patterns toward alpha and theta frequencies. Research has found that music can induce states of calm in which the sense of self-boundary temporarily softens. These effects occur even without conscious attention to the music. The subconscious processes auditory information continuously, using it to calibrate the safety and emotional register of the current environment. Music, in this sense, is not entertainment. It is a direct signal to the part of your brain that decides whether now is safe enough to let go. And here, halfway through the first half of our journey, something quietly forms. The path to inner peace is not one path. It is many. Through the breath, through connection, through the gut, through movement, through sound, through kindness directed inward. What these pathways share is not a single mechanism, but a single destination. The nervous system's recognition that the present moment does not require defense, that the watching can pause, that the body can be, for now, exactly where it is. Your subconscious has been navigating toward this moment since before you lay down tonight. It has been listening. Take a gentle breath. Notice how your body has grown a little quieter than when we began. Not because you forced it, but because the subconscious has been doing exactly what we have been describing. We are tracing the science of a mind finding its way home. You and I and everyone lying still in the dark tonight. There is nothing to hold, nothing to remember, just the gentle current of understanding carrying us forward. Let's continue. Implicit memory, the kind of memory that guides behavior without conscious recollection, is largely managed by the subconscious. Procedural skills, emotional associations formed in early childhood, and the habitual patterns of thought and response that feel simply like personality. All of these are stored in implicit memory systems, including the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, and the amygdala. Research in affective neuroscience has shown that implicit emotional memories, particularly those formed in the context of early attachment relationships, create lasting templates for how the nervous system interprets safety and threat in adult life. These templates are not destiny. Neuroplasticity means they can change, but change begins with awareness. And awareness begins with the willingness to become still enough to hear what is already there. The glymphatic system is a network of fluid-filled channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels that functions as the brain's waste clearance system. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, research in animal models and growing evidence in human studies suggests these channels widen, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow more freely through brain tissue and clear metabolic byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. The glymphatic system is nearly inactive during waking hours and most active in the transition to deep sleep. This discovery has reframed sleep as not only an emotional and cognitive necessity, but a physical maintenance process. The brain's capacity to clear itself in sleep is one of the more remarkable recent findings in neuroscience, and one that continues to be studied. Flow states, the experience of being fully absorbed in a challenging but manageable activity, are characterized by specific neural signatures. Research shows that flow is associated with increased theta wave activity in the frontal midline, a reduction in overly analytical self-monitoring, and a characteristic loosening of self-referential thought. In flow, the inner critic goes quiet. The sense of time changes, and the body feels, paradoxically, both energized and at ease. This state has been identified as one of the most satisfying and restorative the human brain can occupy. Inner peace does not always look like stillness. Sometimes it looks like a mind so fully present that there is no room for anything else. Touch has direct effects on the nervous system that are separate from, and sometimes more powerful than, its emotional associations. The skin contains specialized nerve fibers, found particularly in areas covered by fine hair, that respond specifically to gentle, slow touch. They send signals directly to the insular cortex, activating the social bonding and safety systems of the brain. Research has shown that gentle touch reduces cortisol, lowers heart rate, and activates oxytocin release. Self-administered touch, a hand on the chest, gentle pressure on the forehead, activates similar pathways. The body does not require another person to send itself signals of safety. It has its own language, and it is remarkably willing to listen. The placebo effect, the measurable improvement in health outcomes following a treatment with no active pharmacological ingredient, is, in a meaningful sense, the subconscious mind's capacity to produce real biological change in response to expectation and belief. Neuroimaging studies have shown that placebo treatments activate genuine opioid, dopaminergic, and serotonergic pathways, producing pain relief, reduced anxiety, and improved mood through entirely internal mechanisms. What this tells us is both humbling and worth sitting with. The body has a pharmacy within itself. The subconscious can, under the right conditions, produce calming compounds in response to perceived safety, care, and belief. The expectation of peace, when held by the body rather than simply thought by the mind, is physiologically generative. Gratitude, the subjective recognition and appreciation of positive elements in one's life, has been studied extensively as a psychological and neurological phenomenon. Research has shown that gratitude practice is associated with increased activity in regions linked to meaning-making and positive affect. It reduces inflammatory cytokines, improves sleep quality, and shifts attention from threat monitoring toward what is already present and sufficient. Gratitude does not require that everything be good. It requires only the genuine noticing of what is. And what is, tonight, includes the breath in your body, the quiet around you, and the fact that you are here. The thalamus is a relay structure deep in the center of the brain, routing sensory information to the appropriate cortical regions for processing. During waking hours, the thalamus maintains a high level of activity, ensuring the cortex receives a continuous stream of sensory input. As sleep approaches, thalamic activity decreases, and this gating function gradually closes, reducing the amount of external information that reaches awareness. This is part of why a gradually darkening and quieting environment supports the transition to sleep. It reduces the incoming load, allowing the system to begin its natural downshift. Every signal you remove from the environment is a small permission, one the brain receives before you even notice. Compassion meditation, the deliberate cultivation of goodwill and care toward oneself and others, produces distinct neural effects from other forms of meditation. Research has found that even brief compassion practices reduce stress reactivity, decrease self-criticism, and increase felt connection. What is striking about these findings is that compassion, even when directed outward, quiets the internal threat system. The act of caring for something beyond the self appears to signal to the nervous system that the self is no longer in danger. Peace spreads, it seems, by giving it away. Acceptance, the psychological stance of allowing experience to be as it is, without excessive effort to change, suppress, or escape it, has a specific and measurable effect on the nervous system. Research has found that acceptance-based responses to uncomfortable emotions produce faster physiological recovery than suppression-based responses. Suppression, actively trying not to feel something, maintains or increases activation in threat processing circuits, while acceptance is associated with its decline. Even a single instruction to accept rather than suppress an emotion can produce faster recovery and reduced physiological distress. The subconscious, it seems, responds to permission. When told it does not need to fight, it often stops, halfway through our journey. And the question the title posed, why is the subconscious the key to a calm mind, is beginning to answer itself. Every pathway we have traced tonight leads back to the same architecture, a nervous system that is already designed for peace, already equipped with the chemistry and the circuitry for calm, already moving toward rest whenever the conditions allow. The subconscious is the key not because it is mysterious or hidden, but because it is where the actual work of regulation, repair, and equilibrium happens. Consciousness can notice, can practice, can set conditions, but it is the subconscious that carries the work forward. That part of you has been here all along, and it is still working, gently, right now. Pause here and let the mind do what it does, right now. What you are certain you remember about today is being quietly rewritten, not erased, but reshaped. Every time a memory returns, the brain revises it slightly. It adjusts the edges, softens what no longer serves, keeps what does. You are not the same mind you were this morning, and tonight, As you move towards sleep, something is being revised again. The versions of today that felt unbearable are being given new endings. Your brain is rewriting itself toward meaning, and we continue. The nervous system has a natural resting set point, a baseline level of arousal around which it fluctuates. This set point is influenced by genetics, early attachment experiences, chronic stress exposure, and lifestyle factors including sleep quality and physical activity. Research has shown that the set point is not fixed. It shifts over time, in both directions. People who experience chronically elevated arousal can, through consistent practice, lower their baseline, not to a state of numbness, but to a more genuinely relaxed default. The fact that you are here, in a state of intentional stillness, is not neutral. It is, for the subconscious, a data point, evidence accumulating over time that rest is available, that it is safe to expect this. Neuropeptides, small protein-like molecules that neurons use to communicate, play an important role in the felt quality of inner states. The body's endogenous opioids, compounds produced internally that bind to pain-relieving receptors, produce analgesia, warmth, and a diffuse sense of ease. These compounds are released during gentle exercise, laughter, social bonding, and the experience of beauty. They are also released during deep rest and meditation. The body, in other words, has its own prescription for peace, and it fills it automatically, given the right signal. The signal is simple. It is safety. It is the felt sense that this moment does not require your watchfulness. The brain's salience network, a set of regions responsible for detecting what deserves attention, monitors internal and external environments for signals of relevance, urgency, or novelty, and redirects awareness accordingly. When this network is chronically overactive, as it often is in anxiety and chronic stress, virtually everything feels urgent, and the ability to rest attention on the neutral, the ordinary, and the sufficient becomes impaired. Practices that gently reduce salience network reactivity, including body scan meditation, slow breathing, and ambient sound, do not eliminate the capacity to notice what matters. They restore its proportion. The world regains its range. Some things feel urgent. Most things feel appropriately. Still, the relationship between body position and emotional state is bidirectional. When the jaw unclenches, when the shoulders drop, when the breath deepens, the brainstem receives proprioceptive signals that are associated, through decades of lived experience, with safety. The body has learned to read its own language, and when it hears the physical vocabulary of peace, soft muscles, slow breath, still limbs, it adjusts its assessment of the moment accordingly. Right now, in the dark, the body is reading its own signals, and what it is finding, gradually, is that everything is softer than it was. Loving kindness meditation, also called metta, is a practice that has been studied extensively in Western clinical and neuroscientific contexts. Practitioners silently extend phrases of goodwill toward themselves, toward loved ones, toward neutral others, toward all beings. Research has found that regular practice increases positive affect, reduces implicit self-critical patterns, strengthens compassion, and improves vagal tone. The subconscious, exposed repeatedly to the imagery and felt sense of warmth, updates its working model of the world, from one in which threat is primary to one in which connection is possible. This is not naive optimism. It is neural learning. The difference between equanimity and emotional suppression is biologically measurable. Equanimity, the capacity to remain stable in the presence of both pleasant and unpleasant experience, is associated with flexible, autonomic responses, high heart rate variability, and the ability to engage and disengage attention voluntarily. Suppression, forcing difficult emotional states below awareness, is associated with increased physiological activation and greater long-term distress. Genuine peace is not the absence of feeling. It is the capacity to hold feeling without being held by it. It is the difference between still water and frozen water. One reflects everything. The other is simply stopped. During deep sleep, the brain generates large, synchronized waves called slow oscillations. These waves are associated with the consolidation of memory and the gradual regulation of emotional intensity. More recent research has linked them to a process sometimes described as emotional memory processing, the slow detachment of distress from difficult memories, leaving the factual content intact while the felt urgency softens. This process takes time, and it happens over multiple nights. There is a reason that difficult experiences feel different after sleep. Sometimes, after many nights of sleep, the brain is not forgetting. It is finding perspective. And perspective, for the sleeping mind, is a form of peace. The concept of interoceptive accuracy, the degree to which a person's awareness of bodily signals matches the actual physiological state, has emerged as a predictor of emotional well-being. People with well-developed interoceptive awareness tend to have better emotion regulation, lower anxiety, and a greater sense of connection to their own experience. The body scan, the deliberate, non-judgmental movement of attention through different body regions, is one of the most studied practices for developing this awareness. Tonight, in the stillness, your body is sending its signals. Some part of you is receiving them. That quiet listening to the interior is itself a form of care. The emotion evoked by experiences that exceed current mental frameworks, has been studied as a distinct emotional state with specific physiological and psychological effects. Research has found that awe reduces inflammatory cytokines, shifts attention from self-focused concerns to broader perspective, and produces a characteristic sense of smallness combined with felt connection. Awe is often not comfortable in the moment, but its aftermath is deeply settling. The nervous system, having briefly released the ordinary architecture of self, returns to it more lightly. The concerns that felt heavy before awe feel, afterward, more proportionate, more held. The claustrum is a thin structure deep in the brain whose function remained largely mysterious for most of the 20th century. More recent research has proposed that it may play a role in orchestrating the synchronization of neural activity across the cortex, potentially serving as a kind of coordinator for unified conscious experience. Some researchers have also explored its possible involvement in the transition between waking and sleep states, and in the modulation of attention. The edges of what is known about consciousness remain genuinely open, and at those edges, something feels less like information and more like wonder. Emotional granularity. the ability to make fine-grained distinctions between emotional states rather than categorizing them broadly, is associated with better emotional regulation and well-being. Research has shown that people with high emotional granularity experience emotions less intensely, recover more quickly from difficult states, and are less likely to engage in unhelpful coping behaviors. The reason appears to be that precise labeling of emotional states engages regulatory brain regions in a way that reduces reactive processing. The subconscious does not benefit from having its signals translated into vague categories. It benefits from specificity, from being heard clearly, from a mind that can say, "This is grief, not failure," and let that be enough. The brain's midline structures, the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the precuneus, form the core of the default mode network and are especially active during self-referential thought. Research using functional MRI has found that experienced meditators can produce measurable reductions in default mode network activity, associated with subjective reports of boundary softening and expanded present moment awareness. This is not pathology. It is, in a sense, the nervous system's deepest rest, the brief softening of the project of self-maintenance. And it happens, in smaller degrees, every night, as you approach the threshold of sleep. Diaphragmatic breathing, breathing that fully engages the diaphragm rather than relying primarily on chest expansion, activates stretch receptors in the lungs that send signals through the vagus nerve to the brainstem, triggering parasympathetic activation. This response was described by cardiologist Herbert Benson at Harvard Medical School as the relaxation response, a reproducible physiological state that is the reciprocal of the stress response. The relaxation response is not exotic or difficult to reach. It is waiting in the breath. Each slow, full exhale is the body choosing, without being asked, to soften. The concept of somatic experiencing, developed by trauma researcher Peter Levine, proposes that unresolved stress is stored not only as narrative memory, but as patterns of tension and incomplete physiological activation in the body. When these patterns are gently discharged through movement, breath, or gradual body awareness, the nervous system can complete cycles that were interrupted, releasing what has been held in tissue rather than thought. The body remembers, but it also knows how to let go, if given the conditions to do so. Tonight is one of those conditions. We now understand inner peace not as a single state, but as a dynamic equilibrium, a set of continuously balanced systems that can be disrupted and restored, that have their own rhythms, and that respond to conditions in ways that are measurable, learnable, and available to almost everyone. The subconscious is the primary manager of this equilibrium. It monitors, adjusts, signals, and repairs, all without waiting for instructions from consciousness. What consciousness can do, what you are doing tonight, is create the conditions under which the subconscious can do its work most freely. Less noise, less urgency, less demand to solve what does not need solving tonight. Stillness is not passive. It is an act of collaboration between the mind you know and the mind you don't. The hippocampus creates cognitive maps, not only of physical space, but, research suggests, of abstract conceptual and social territory as well. This may explain why familiar, safe environments feel inherently calming, the hippocampus has already mapped them as not threatening, and why the internal landscape of a familiar state of peace, rehearsed through regular stillness, gradually becomes easier to find. Each quiet night adds to that map, not to somewhere else. To here, adenosine is a molecule that accumulates in the brain during waking hours as a byproduct of neural activity. The longer you are awake, the more adenosine builds, creating what researchers call sleep pressure. The increasing biological inclination towards sleep, adenosine binds to receptors in regions that promote wakefulness, gradually inhibiting their activity and creating the pull towards sleep. Caffeine works by blocking these receptors, not by creating energy, but by preventing the brain from registering its own tiredness as caffeine clears the system, which, with a half-life of approximately 5 to 6 hours, takes longer than most people account for. Adenosine returns to its receptors, and the pull towards sleep deepens. Right now, if the day has been long, adenosine has been patient. It has been waiting here for you. Research on attachment and the nervous system has shown that securely attached individuals, those who have experienced consistent, trustworthy connection, tend to show lower baseline cortisol, more flexible autonomic responses, better emotional regulation, and higher vagal tone. Importantly, attachment patterns can shift across the lifespan toward greater security through consistently safe relationships, through therapy, and through what researchers describe as earned security, the internalized experience of being held. Even in the absence of the original holder, the nervous system does not require someone to be present to feel accompanied. It simply requires the memory of being accompanied to be true. Recent research in predictive processing, a framework for understanding how the brain models its environment, suggests that the brain is not a passive receiver of sensory information, but a predictive system that continuously generates models of the world and updates them based on incoming data. In this framework, anxiety is often the result of a predictive model that has learned to expect difficulty, and that interprets ambiguous signals as confirming what it already anticipated. Inner peace, in this framework, involves gradually updating that model, providing the nervous system with experiences that revise its predictions. Calm becomes expected, rest becomes anticipated, and anticipation, for the subconscious, is already a form of arrival. The prefrontal cortex continues developing into the mid-20s, and its connections to subcortical emotion regulation regions continue to mature and strengthen across adulthood. Given sufficient support, this means that the capacity for inner peace is not determined by early experience, biology, or circumstance alone. It is a lifelong development, one that responds to practice, to safety, to sleep, and to the accumulated weight of small moments of stillness. Each quiet night is a contribution to that development, not a dramatic one, but a real one. In the language of synaptic connections, gradually reinforced. The sensory cortices, responsible for processing sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, are not passive recording systems. They are continuously modulated by attention, expectation, and emotional state. When the nervous system is at rest, sensory processing becomes more nuanced, capable of registering the fine-grained richness of the present moment, the texture of a surface, the subtle shifts in ambient sound, the warmth of the air. When the nervous system is in a guarded mode, sensory processing narrows, focusing on what might need attention and filtering out what does not. Inner peace is not only a state of fewer difficult feelings, it is a state of fuller perception. Research in chronobiology, the study of biological rhythms, has shown that the body operates on multiple overlapping cycles. Beyond the 24-hour circadian rhythm, shorter cycles of roughly 90 to 120 minutes alternate throughout the day, corresponding to shifts in autonomic balance and cognitive style. Rest periods aligned with these natural rhythms support cognitive recovery and emotional regulation more effectively than sustained effort without pause. The body is not designed for unbroken vigilance. It is designed for rhythm, and rhythm, in its very nature, includes the return, the experience of beauty, whether in music, in nature, in art, or in the structure of a scientific idea, activates regions associated with meaning-making, reward, and present moment awareness in ways that overlap significantly with the neural signature of inner peace. Aesthetic experience draws attention outward and simultaneously inward, suspending self-referential thinking while deepening felt presence. Research has shown that regular exposure to beauty, even briefly, even in everyday contexts, is associated with reduced anxiety, increased positive affect, and a greater sense of meaning. Beauty is not a luxury the nervous system receives after peace is achieved. It is one of the paths that leads there. Memory reconsolidation is the process by which recalled memories become temporarily open to modification before being restabilized. This understanding has overturned older models of memory as fixed and unchanging. It suggests that every time a memory is retrieved, it can be influenced by the current context, emotional tone, and new information available at the moment of recall. What this means, gently, is that memories do not have to be analyzed or confronted to have their emotional weight reduced. They simply have to be recalled in a context of safety, in the presence of warmth and the absence of threat. The past, in other words, is still available for revision, slowly, over time, and often in sleep. The subconscious is the key to inner peace, not because it is more powerful than consciousness, or more trustworthy, or more correct. It is the key because it is always working, always processing, always regulating, always making its tiny adjustments toward equilibrium. Consciousness can interfere with this process through excessive analysis, through resistance, through the exhausting project of managing every moment. Or it can support it. Tonight, you have been supporting it by lying still, by letting sound and breath and slow language move through you without demand, by giving the subconscious what it needs most, the signal that this moment is safe, that the careful watching can rest, that the peace it has been quietly building, beneath everything, is allowed to surface now. You might be feeling very quiet now. That is not nothing. That is the nervous system doing what it knows how to do. Sleep does not come because you chase it. It comes because you stop. And right now, something in you is stopping, not giving up, not going dark, simply allowing the process that has been waiting for this moment to begin. Your mind knows how to dissolve into sleep. It has done this every night of your life. We are almost there. The body, in deep rest. begins its nightly repair. Growth hormone, released primarily during slow-wave sleep, initiates cellular repair, protein synthesis, and immune support. This is not metaphor. It is maintenance. Every night of genuine sleep is a night the body took care of itself. That care is still happening, even now, as you move toward it. The brain's threat detection regions, which have been quiet tonight, are learning something. Every experience of genuine ease teaches them that ease is possible, that the world sometimes does not require alarm. That rest is a legitimate response to this particular moment. They remember, and the memory, over time, becomes the new expectation. Breathing at roughly 5 cycles per minute synchronizes cardiac and neural rhythms in a state researchers call cardiorespiratory coherence. In this state, the heart, the lungs, and the nervous system fall briefly into alignment. People describe it as feeling settled in a way they cannot fully explain. The body understands it, even when the mind does not have the words. The body temperature drops slightly in the first hour of sleep. This drop is part of the circadian signal that tells the brain the day is ending. The systems that served wakefulness can now begin their slower, deeper work. Warmth at the surface, coolness at the core. The body knows this transition. It has been practiced for every night of a lifetime. The brain contains a vast population of support cells called glia. For much of neuroscience history, these cells were thought of as passive structure, insulation around the neural wires. More recent research has shown that certain glial cells actively modulate how signals are transmitted between neurons, regulate sleep depth, and participate in the brain's nightly clearing process. The quietest cells in the brain, it turns out, are among the most involved. There is always more happening in the silence than the surface suggests. The parasympathetic state that sleep enables is not simply a pause in function. It is a different mode, one in which the body's repair, immune, and memory consolidation systems operate more fully. You do not need to do anything for this to happen. You only need to allow it. The machinery has been ready since the moment you lay down. Neuroscientists describe a phenomenon called neural synchrony, the coordinated activity of large populations of neurons at the same frequency. During deep sleep, this synchrony deepens. The brain begins to move as a more unified whole. This is sometimes experienced in the moment before full sleep arrives, as a sudden loosening, as though many things that were separate simply stopped needing to be separate. The subconscious continues its work through the night. During certain sleep stages, it processes emotional memory, drawing meaning from experience while softening the intensity of what was difficult. By morning, the night will have done quiet work that no waking hour could match. You do not need to direct it. It already knows what to do. There is a state, just before sleep arrives, in which the usual rules of thought begin to loosen. Images appear without narrative logic. Words arrive from nowhere. The body feels both present and distant. This is the hypnagogic threshold, the edge where the subconscious is already speaking in its own language. It is not random. It is the mind beginning to dream its way into the night. Melatonin is not a sedative. It is a signal, produced by the pineal gland in response to darkness, telling the brain that night has arrived and sleep is appropriate. Its role is timing, not force. When the environment and the body are aligned, when darkness is respected, when the pace of the day has slowed, melatonin rises, and the transition becomes smooth. You have been slowing down for some time now. The body has been listening. The transition from wakefulness to sleep is not a single event. It is a gradual process, a series of small surrenders, each one releasing a little more of the careful watching that waking life requires. Each surrender is preceded by a moment of allowing, of noticing that this particular tension has been held long enough. You do not need to decide when to sleep. You only need to keep allowing the next small surrender. Research in positive psychology has consistently found that the capacity to find meaning, to situate experience within a larger narrative of purpose and connection, is one of the strongest predictors of well-being across cultures and age groups. Meaning is not always explanatory. Sometimes it is simply the sense that this moment, however quiet, however ordinary, is part of something that matters. Tonight is part of something that matters. Rest is part of something that matters. The fact that you are here, in the dark, breathing slowly, is part of something that matters. The anterior insula, when active in the context of stillness rather than threat, produces what some researchers describe as the felt sense of being present, a quality of awareness that is simultaneously aware of the body and beyond it. It is the neural substrate of what contemplatives across traditions have called simply being here, not thinking about being here, not evaluating the quality of the being, simply here. During certain stages of sleep, the prefrontal cortex significantly reduces its regulatory activity, while deeper emotional processing systems become more active. This creates conditions in which emotional associations can be worked through in ways that waking cognition cannot access. The subconscious, freed from oversight, does its most direct work. The night is not empty. It is full of quiet revision. Could the subconscious be the key to inner peace it already is? Every regulation you didn't consciously perform today, every threat your nervous system quietly assessed and cleared, every breath your brainstem calibrated without your awareness, that was the subconscious, maintaining the peace that waking life is built upon. You have been resting on it all along. The body's circadian clock, housed in the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, coordinates the timing of virtually every physiological process: hormone release, immune activity, cell renewal, temperature regulation, and the sleep-wake cycle itself. This coordination happens through the synchronized expression of clock genes in virtually every cell of the body. You are not one clock. You are trillions of clocks, all keeping approximately the same rhythm. And right now, in the dark, most of them are beginning to slow. The immune system and the nervous system share a chemical language. Signaling molecules are produced and received by both systems, creating a continuous dialogue that science has come to call psychoneuroimmunology. When the nervous system is at peace, immune function is generally better calibrated. When it is under chronic activation, immune responses become less balanced. Tonight, in the quiet, something in the immune system is settling too. Everything is part of the same conversation. The word peace comes from the Latin pax, meaning agreement. Compact, the end of hostility. In the deepest biological sense, inner peace is precisely this: an agreement among the systems of the body that the hostilities of the day are over, that the armistice has been signed, that the careful watching can, for now, stand down. The subconscious has been waiting for this agreement all day, and you have finally offered it. Some of the most consistent findings in the study of well-being are also the simplest. Sleep, connection, movement, quiet, time in nature, the perception of meaning, the capacity to feel, and to let feeling pass. None of these are complex. None of them require achievement. They are conditions, available to most, more often than most realize, under which the biology of peace becomes its own answer. The subconscious does not need to be understood to be trusted. It has been running this body, calibrating this nervous system, and quietly orienting toward rest since before memory began. It knows things that thought has not yet caught up with. It is already further into sleep than the part of you still listening to these words. And it has been patient, and capable, and quiet. The whole time. Theta waves, as you approach sleep, are carrying you somewhere the waking mind cannot follow. Into the hypnagogic space where the day's debris floats loose and the subconscious begins its patient, entirely private work. You do not need to know what happens there. You only need to let it happen. The breathing has likely slowed since these words began. The body did that. The subconscious did that. You did that. Not through effort, but through permission, through the decision to be here, to let the words move through, to stop for this small stretch of night, trying to manage what manages itself. Right now, across the world, many nervous systems are doing exactly what yours is doing, releasing the day, quieting the careful watching, moving through the same ancient choreography toward the same ancient darkness. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. It is one of the oldest things living things do. The science of inner peace is, in the end, the science of listening to a body that has always known more than the mind credited it with knowing. The subconscious has been carrying this knowledge from the beginning. Tonight, you heard a little of it, and it recognized you. Peace was never something you had to build. It was something you had to allow. The subconscious knew this all along. And now, in the quiet, in the dark, in the soft evidence of a body finally letting go, so do you. And so our quiet journey through the science of inner peace comes to a gentle close. We began with the paradox at the heart of it all, that the mind processes 11 million signals every second, and peace is not the absence of that activity, but its most elegant arrangement. We passed through the vagus nerve, that long messenger of safety, through the adenosine building patiently in the dark, waiting for you to stop, through the sleeping brain, turning its quiet current loose to clear what the day left behind. We discovered that the gut and the brain speak the same language. That touching your own chest sends signals of care that the nervous system receives as safety. That memory itself, recalled in a moment of calm, is always available for a gentler revision. And we ended where we began, at the subconscious. Still working, still orienting, still doing the most important things without asking to be noticed. It has been, tonight, exactly what it always is. Faithful, quiet, already here. The mind you were born with was built for this. Not for the accelerating noise of the world you move through. Not for the pace of everything needing to happen at once. But for this. For dark rooms and quiet breath and the slow, patient surrender to a body that knows what it needs. The science confirms what the body already feels. Peace is not a destination. It is a return. And every time you return, every quiet night, every slowed breath, the way back becomes a little more familiar, a little less effort, a little more like home. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about this. Every fact we explored tonight was describing the same thing. The vagal signals, the adenosine tide, the nervous system finally standing down, the neurons synchronizing in slow, dark waves. All of it, every piece, was describing what peace feels like from the inside of a body that has finally stopped working against itself. You are that body. Let your entire being dissolve into the space between thought and dream, the space where memory softens, where the self grows quiet, where the subconscious is free to do its gentlest, deepest work. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left between you and rest. Only peace. Tonight's journey was built for minds that needed to remember that peace was already there. A gentle like or subscribe carries this space forward to one more restless mind searching in the dark for the same quiet science. One calm night, one sleepy soul. At a time, the subconscious is still doing what it does, without your help, without your direction, without needing anything from you now. You don't need to hold any of this. It was never yours to carry. You have traveled inward tonight, through corridors most people never pause to notice. You touched the architecture of a mind finding its way to ease, and found it more familiar than it seemed. You can allow these thoughts of peace to fade now, like the last image of a dream at dawn. Present, then softer, then simply part of everything, leaving only the quiet, unheld calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if all you have carried today is being sorted by careful, invisible hands, and is simply setting itself down. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way consolidation does. Not with force, but with quiet intention, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, your subconscious will still be there, still tending, still listening, still doing the quiet work that makes everything else possible, still becoming. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, gentle explorer. And remember, your mind has always known the way to calm. Good night.